You're tuned into Radio Pacific.
California has been long considered to be a sanctuary for all, but a group of Republican lawmakers believe certain laws protecting these communities have gone too far.
Cities across the Bay Area, like San Francisco and San Jose, limit local police from working with immigration enforcement.
The battle lines are being drawn in real time. California is not backing down on sanctuary policies for immigrants, even as federal crackdowns are looming.
It's May 2025, and the second Trump administration is showing they will try anything to carry out his historic deportation crackdown. California, with the most undocumented immigrants in the country, is refusing to cooperate and digging in as a sanctuary state. I'm Eli Cohen, and that's all ahead on the first episode of Radio Pacific. A new show from KALW, we explore the backstory to current events impacting California. Of course, this year, the whole world is being impacted by one man. The first 100 days of Trump's second presidency have been so relentless, so destabilizing, 1 hour is barely enough to scratch the surface. As Trump invokes laws and trade policies last seen in the 18th century, many are looking to California as a progressive counterweight. The state has not always been as left coast as it may now appear, but with a solid blue state government and a population and economy to rival most nations, California is once again taking an outsized role in opposing the Trump administration. This has been most apparent with immigration. California has the most undocumented immigrants of any state. As Trump tries to make good on his signature campaign promise of sealing the border and deporting the most people in American history, California sits directly in the administration's crosshairs. We're what's known as a sanctuary state, meaning state and local entities are forbidden to work with any federal agents as they try to remove people from the country. In fact, the sanctuary movement has deep roots in California. Berkeley was the first city to pass such a resolution, back in 1971. The law provided refuge to conscientious objectors, and San Francisco later expanded the concept to include asylum seekers from Central America. Today, we've got 3 segments to better understand the showdown on immigration between Trump and California. We'll feature a short documentary from 2017 that looks inside the San Francisco Rapid Response Line, a 24/7 community-run hotline that monitors ICE activity within the city. Then we'll have a roundtable discussion with the filmmaker and the hotline's current coordinator to understand what enforcement in San Francisco looks like right now. But first, we're joined by Kevin R. Johnson, a professor and former dean of the UC Davis School of Law. He specializes in Chicano studies, civil rights, and immigration. Professor Johnson has been studying immigration law since the 1980s. I hoped he could provide some perspective on the past few months and help me understand California's unique and often disturbing role in the history of immigration in this country.
With a broad brush, President Trump is unlike any modern American president, both in his devotion to restricting immigration and in his harsh language directed at talking about immigrants. He talks about immigrants at times in ways that some would say is racist, is certainly deeply troublesome, such as Haitians eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. He's talked about immigrants as poisoning our blood, which harkens back to the days of the anti-miscegenation laws barring interracial marriage. He started off his 2016 presidential campaign by talking about Mexicans as criminals and rapists. And he's talked at various times about immigrants as if they were less than human and could be treated with impunity. He's also brought some extraordinary policies that differ from those of any modern American president. He has invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to try to summarily deport without due process, without a hearing, without attorneys, without judges, in sending people out of the country. And we have a situation where some people are learning that they have family members who were deported because they've seen them on TV in El Salvador and didn't know what had happened to them. We have wrongful arrests This is a case where a man went through hearings, did what he was supposed to do, was found eligible to stay in the United States, and then gets picked up, ripped from his family, and sent to El Salvador. And the government says, well, it's a clerical error, like, getting, the wrong holiday card, turned this guy's life upside down. And you combine policies like that and statements like that with the harsh language, you have to conclude that this administration, it's willing to go to the limits of the law and beyond. But the thing that we aren't accounting for yet is this is the kind of landmark that will have an impact on generations of people in the United States. We still have Japanese Americans traumatized by the internment and thinking about how that could happen. We have Mexican Americans who are generations away from the Mexican repatriation during the Great Depression who still know that they're not quite full members of American society.
Absolutely. I'd like to turn focus squarely to California now. During Trump's first administration, California did pass a so-called sanctuary state law. I'd like to start there. Could you just help me understand what exactly does that law do and what does that law not do? And then how is it playing out now in the first few months of Trump 2?
The basics are this. The federal government is in charge of immigration enforcement, and the state government is not in charge of immigration enforcement. The federal government can decide who to admit to the country, who to deport from the country. States can't do anything like that. At the same time, the states can't be forced to assist the federal government in immigration enforcement. California, the Values Act, the Sanctuary Law, SB 54, state and local governments can't use any state and local resources to assist the federal government in immigration enforcement. And one of the reasons, you can say it's a sanctuary reason, we want to provide safe haven for immigrants. But the truth of the matter is the states and local governments are in charge of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of all residents, including immigrants. And one very conservative Los Angeles police chief in the 1970s decided that the LAPD, which isn't known for being liberal, but they would not be inquiring into the immigration status of crime suspects, crime witnesses, or crime victims. And why did the police department come to that conclusion? Because immigrants who are part of our community aren't going to cooperate with police if they think the police are going to get them removed from the country. So if you want to be an effective police department, you have to be viewed as a criminal law enforcement officer, not an immigration enforcement officer. So even though California's sanctuary law is called California Sanctuary Law, I think it might be better to call it a California law enforcement law. I don't know if I would call it a sanctuary law, because the truth of the matter is the Trump administration is in charge of immigration enforcement, and they can enforce the laws here, and they will enforce the laws here. And we've seen some immigration and customs enforcement operations under President Biden. We'll see them under President Trump. And California immigrants are just as afraid as immigrants elsewhere about what might happen.
Let me ask you specifically how things are playing out in California in the past few months. Most California sheriff's departments have said they would follow the law as written. A notable few have said they would either work around it or openly defy it. Can we start there? How has this played out, perhaps outside of the major cities, LA, the Bay Area?
I mean, there's been some give and take between the state government and some local county sheriffs. And the one thing that I think is important is that if some of these local law enforcement agencies, there have been a number in the foothills and also Kern County that's made some noises about not following the Values Act, there's a good possibility that somebody, a non-citizen who ends up in ICE custody because of a local office's decisions, they could well sue these entities. The federal government doesn't necessarily care so much if they get sued. In fact, I think this administration views lawsuits as a cost of doing business. But state and local entities that violate the Value Act could end up getting sued, could end up getting injunctions entered against them, damages assessed against them. And I think they're going to take it a little more carefully. And I do think that the Attorney General are making it fairly clear that all entities in the state have to follow it. And we're not going to allow Huntington Beach, for example, to have a very different policy than the rest of the state. And my sense is the Attorney General's office is ready to enforce the Values Act, if necessary, against entities that start violating it.
I see. If I could turn now a little bit to the history of different deportation efforts in the country. I know you've studied multiple in the 1930s, the 1950s. Could you tell me a little bit about how those played out and what, if anything, we can learn from that history, how it might be relevant today?
That's a good point. We as a nation sometimes don't seem to learn from our history. But I would go back even further and talk about how in California, in response to Chinese immigration in the 1800s, this state was a leader in terms of anti-Chinese sentiment and engaged in violence against Chinese immigrants in what I would call, in some mountain towns, engaged in ethnic cleansings of Chinese migrants from the community, would burn down Chinatowns, would beat and murder at times Chinese workers. And because of the unrest in California, Washington, and some other states, the Congress of the United States in 1882 passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which barred Chinese immigration to the United States and led to things like mass detention of Chinese migrants on Angel Island in San Francisco Bay. And the Chinese Exclusion Act, some part of it remained in effect until 1965, or parts of it did. And that's had a huge impact on Chinese sense of belonging in American society for generations. And California was at the center of that. In the 1930s, the Great Depression took our economy to its knees, and state and local governments, including California government, including Los Angeles County, engaged in what was known as the Mexican repatriation, and persons of Mexican ancestry were rounded up in the streets of Los Angeles and put on buses and trains and sent to Mexico. Some of those persons were U.S. citizens by birth, and about 1 million people were forcibly removed from the country. It's almost humorous to me when people talk about the left coast, and California is always a sanctuary state and easy on immigration, and some of the worst, most sad policies in American history have generated from California. We seem to forget it wasn't that long ago, and I'm dating myself, but in 1994, California voters passed Proposition 187, one of the most tough immigration initiatives in this nation's history, would have barred undocumented children from the schools, would have denied all public benefits to undocumented immigrants, would have required police to report undocumented immigrants to federal immigration authorities. And that's not all that different from the kinds of language that President Trump used in his 2016 election.
I mean, that's a very sobering point, and you draw such a clear line from the 19th century to the turn of the 21st century. It makes California in the last 10 years feel almost more like a blip. What do you think is the takeaway from this pretty dark history? I
think what I take from the history is that Asian American and Latino political involvement in the election of people of color to the legislature has changed the perspectives on people in office. I mean, how often is it that you have a Javier Becerra as the Attorney General, or, Rob Bonta as Attorney General, or a Latino caucus in the California legislature, which is in the double digits? Latino activism, Asian American activism, the understanding that not being politically engaged, not being politically active has impacts, helped change California.
That's Kevin R. Johnson, professor of law at UC Davis. When we come back, we get an inside look at one group that is resisting the new immigration regime, the 24/7 community-run hotline that monitors ICE activity right here in San Francisco.
Hello, Rapid Response Hotline.
I'm calling because my uncle was detained by ICE on 24th and Mission.
He has already been taken?
Yeah, he has been taken.
Stay with us. Hey, it's still me, Eli. Just wanted to let you know that Radio Pacific is fully independent local media based right here in the Bay Area. If you like what you're hearing, the biggest way you can support us is to send this episode to a few friends and to subscribe to and rate this podcast feed. Seriously, those two things make a huge difference. So thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the show.
You're tuned in to Radio Pacific from KAL in San Francisco, California.
Welcome back to Radio Pacific. I'm Eli Cohen. When we talk about the immigration debate in the U.S., it can often feel very remote. After all, the majority of us are citizens, and while many undocumented migrants make up the majority of crucial sectors of American life, their precarious status forces them to remain on the margins, out of sight. As for speaking to a journalist whose job it is to publicly share what they're told, that can quite literally be a life-threatening risk. So when I came across Enforcement Hours by Paloma Martinez, frankly, I was entranced for the entirety of the film. The short documentary is set here in San Francisco, and what I found so powerful about it is how simple it is. The entire film is just recordings of phone calls to the San Francisco Rapid Response Hotline, a community-run service that monitors ICE activity here in the city and provides legal services to those who need them. Just those calls. No narrator, no interviews, not even music. And the visuals are just shots of San Francisco streets. People going about their daily life. Paloma graciously agreed to let us adapt the film for radio, but I cannot recommend enough you go watch the full thing. So without further ado, this is Enforcement Hours by Paloma Martinez.
$10 p.m., somewhere in San Francisco.
Is this an emergency agency? This is the Rapid Response line in case immigration agents are confronting you. I'm just testing this out to see if I stored the number right. Thank God I don't need it now, but I do need to save it and give it to all my people. There are so many undocumented folks here. People are really worried.
Chinatown.
Do you see an immigration official right now?
Right now? No, I don't see one. I just want information about how this works.
This hotline is for the San Francisco area. Call this number when you see an immigration raid happening. We will go out there fast and try to provide legal services. Sometimes it's not so clear what's happening, but it's better to call in than not.
Yeah, better to know than not. You know, these immigration officers are very powerful.
Yeah, they have guns and everything. It's very scary.
They have the right to kill people, right?
How did you hear about this hotline? On TV?
Yes, I always watch the Cantonese news. If I call this line, will I find you? Really, you are a good person to chat with.
Somewhere in San Francisco.
Rapid Response Hotline.
Yes, do you help all immigrants or just Spanish, Arabic, and Chinese?
Is this an ICE raid?
Pardon?
Are you calling about an ICE raid?
Potential. I'm just concerned. I'm from a European country. I'm here illegally, and I wondered if you help Europeans or just Spanish, Arabic, and Chinese.
We help anyone who is involved with an ICE raid. But is there an ICE raid happening right now?
I imagine.
This is an emergency line, sir. Can you please call if there's a ICE raid
Well, I
happening?
feel like I'm having an emergency. I am having an emergency. There's a bunch of illegal people in our country. I shouldn't be here, and
Rapid Response Hotline.
you guys are going to have some big surprises when you go for certain raids. You are going to get some nice surprises, you traitor.
Mission District.
Hi, San Francisco Rapid Response Hotline.
Oh, lo que pasa que como han estado anunciando mucho
Since they've been talking so much about San Francisco and so on,
esta mañana yo me desperté.
today I woke up afraid because I have to pick up my kids from school.
Y dijeron que iba a haber redados aquí en San
There are rumors about raids in the mission.
If you see immigration agents in your neighborhood, call this number.
Mission District.
Hi, I own a restaurant and I had a few customers in here eating and they left. And they were saying because immigration or ICE was on 24th and Mission. This was about, I want to say, 20 minutes ago.
24th and Mission?
Well, the lady got a phone call, and she got a phone call, and like her whole facial expression changed, and I was like, "Is everything okay?" She was like, "I have to go." And there was 6 other tables, and I guess she told them, so everyone left.
And how many customers left the establishment?
That left were 10.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Your whole restaurant left?
Mission District.
Hi, San Francisco Rapid Response Hotline.
Hi there. I'm at Second and Jesse, and there's a Homeland Security Federal Protective Police car sitting here. I don't see anybody. I don't see any ICE guys, but this is a Homeland Security car. Oh wait, here they are. Police, DHS. Oh, it looks like they're on their lunch break.
Unknown location.
Hi, I wanted to confirm that there was ICE activity in the mission today.
So we've been receiving a large volume of calls today. Reports about 24th and Mission, 14th and Mission, Marshall Elementary, and the Foods Co. In the Bayview and the Foods Co. here in the Mission. We've sent dispatchers to all sites. No ICE activity. They've all been false alarms.
Unknown location.
Hi, San Francisco Rapid Response Hotline.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who are undocumented, and they're trying not to draw attention to themselves, but they're wondering if ICE does show up in their neighborhood, and we got the numbers from the news to call, but they're unclear as to exactly what your organization will do. Will they stop the raids from happening?
Well, the fact is that when enforcement is happening, we can't actually stop it from happening.
But I thought you guys stopped it from happening. That's what we were looking for.
No, I don't think that there's any entity that would be able to do that, to actually stop the enforcement from happening.
You know what's really unfortunate? I was talking to my friends is that because California has made these sanctuaries, they've called attention to themselves, and that is unfortunate. This may have not even been happening if they never announced that and bolstered it. At least that's what my friends are saying. It's like they've just caused it. They just made ICE just focus in on these places, which is unfortunate. Seems like it's backfiring. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I hate it. I thought the sanctuary city stopped ICE.
No. That's not exactly what sanctuary does.
Mission District.
Hello, Rapid Response Hotline.
I'm calling because my uncle was detained by ICE on 24th and Mission.
He has already been taken?
Yeah, he has been taken. Migration, I think it was there on 24th and Mission.
Okay. You know how old he is?
He was born on November 2nd, 1958.
You know what, his status was?
Yuba County.
When he was taken?
Oh, his status?
Hang up or press 1. Hello?
You have a call from an inmate in the Yuba County jail.
This call is from a correction facility and is subject to monitoring and recording.
Hello?
A mí me trajeron aquí.
They brought me here.
El departamento de ICE.
ICE brought me here.
¿Qué pasó, señor? ¿Por qué no?
What happened, sir? Why were you detained?
La verdad yo no entiendo por qué me trajeron a mí hasta acá. Yo no conozco nada para acá.
I don't know why they brought me all the way here. I don't know a thing about this area, and my brothers know even less.
Yo estoy...
I guess you could say I am undocumented. Since 2001, I've been in the process to fix my documentation. My brother petitioned for me. He is a citizen.
Ajá. Desde el 2001.
Since 2001.
¿Usted está casado?
Are you married?
Divorciado.
¿Y usted tiene hijos, Adrián?
Do you have kids?
Sí, tengo 2.
No sé si le vamos a poder ayudar.
I'm not sure we can help you.
Dear Alexis, I would like you to know that I miss you very much, and I love you very much with all my heart. This place here had made me reflect on my errors. I hope that you can forgive me. Love, Daddy.
Good morning, Rapid Response. How can I help you?
Didn't you know it was against the federal law to harbor illegal immigrants?
Is this an emergency?
No. Just keeping your line busy.
Pure and holy, right and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
That was Enforcement Hours by Paloma Martinez, adapted for radio. You can watch the full film on the New York Times Op Docs or on palomamartinez.com. When we come back, we have Paloma in studio to tell us more about the film, alongside Finn Palamaro, who currently manages the San Francisco line.
You know, folks can't imagine, I think, if they're not undocumented, what it's like to deal with an enforcement agency who routinely skirts right at the edge of legality in order to carry out enforcement.
Stick with us. Hey, okay, one more thing. We do have a newsletter. I know everyone has a newsletter, just like everyone has a podcast. This one is very low-key. Comes out just once a month, along with each new episode. Gives a little more info and context about that month's topic, previews of what's to come, and general updates on the show. Not spam, good stuff. You can sign up on our website, radiopacific.co.
You're tuned in to Radio Pacific from KL in San Francisco, California.
Welcome back. This is Radio Pacific. I'm Eli Cohen. We just heard a radio adaptation of Enforcement Hours, a short film by Paloma Martinez that chronicles San Francisco's Rapid Response Hotline, a 24/7 phone line that monitors ICE activity in the city and provides legal assistance to those facing immigration enforcement. The film was actually made in 2017 during the first Trump administration, but I'm sorry to say it feels equally relevant today. To better understand the parallels between then and now, I got in touch with Mission Action, the nonprofit that organizes the Rapid Response Line today. Finn Palamaro, the primary coordinator of the line, joined me and Paloma in studio to discuss the film, enforcement in San Francisco during the first 100 days of Trump's second term, and just what it's like to be on the front lines of the unfolding deportation crackdown. Maybe to start out, could I just have, I guess, Paloma, let's start with you. Would you mind just introducing yourself, your name, and however you'd like to be known?
Sure. I'm Paloma Martinez. I'm an independent filmmaker. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Great. And Finn?
Yeah, my name is Finn Palamaro. I basically oversee the coordination of SF Island, which is one network here in San Francisco, and then also the Rapid Response Network.
Paloma, I wanted to ask you the first question, which is basically, how did you decide to make your film about the San Francisco Rapid Response Hotline? And then I guess kind of as a follow-up is specifically the format. How did you decide on the format?
So I think I was compelled to do it for very personal reasons. I'd always wanted to make something that felt like you were experiencing the fear that a lot of migrants feel in real time. So I grew up in a migrant community in Houston, Texas, in the late 80s and 90s. There were a lot of mixed status families. And I grew up with this sort of unclassified kind of fear of foreboding all the time. There was always this tension that families could be separated. So I kind of wanted to go beyond the headlines and make the audience feel maybe what people in these communities feel. But I didn't know how to resolve the tension of, well, if you put a camera in someone's face, someone who is vulnerable and potentially under threat, you might be making something that creates empathy or moves minds, but you're also putting them in harm's way, potentially.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to square that, quite frankly. And so that was always in the back of my mind once I started making films around the year 2016. And it was the time of the first Trump administration. And the administration's very overt threats came very quickly right after his election, specifically threats on what people call sanctuary cities, right? And San Francisco kind of seemed like the main target at the time. And I read about the work that the San Francisco Rapid Response Network was doing. And just because they were really gracious in allowing me to see sort of the inner workings and hear what kinds of questions they were getting on the daily basis, I realized that there was something maybe even more interesting in the hotline, which was this just utter confusion, right? This utter confusion, this self-policing that folks were doing because of the confusion, because of the fear, because of the misinformation. And ultimately, the fear is the point, right? We didn't need to see ICE raids in real time. We didn't need to put people under threat. We could use the audio of the hotline to create this sense of fear. And in a way, the anonymity of it perhaps is even more potent.
Thank you for that. Finn, I saw you nodding along to a lot of what Paloma was saying there. Let's back up a little bit. From a basic level, how does the hotline work? Like there's a number, you call it. What happens?
Yeah, definitely. We're made up of many different nonprofits. So we coordinate the hotline at Mission Action, and we're the fiscal lead, so we hold the grants with the city. Previously, it was all funded through the city. Right now, we get funding from a few other sources. We sort of have an outreach team that does workshops out in the community, know your rights, and also actually mans the hotline 24/7. We also do attorney activation, and altogether, it's 21 different organizations in the Bay Area that are making this happen. Or sorry, just in San Francisco, just for our hotline. So there's different hotlines for different counties around the Bay. So it's a pretty huge undertaking. So essentially, when somebody calls, we have somebody, sometimes we have two people on the line, especially during busy hours. But the majority of the calls that we get are not, immigration enforcement, which is good. Well, the line is very visible online. So a lot of people look up the line and people mistake us for ICE all the time. People also call us looking to kind of get updates on their immigration case because it's called the Rapid Response Hotline. And I think especially in Spanish, it sounds like extra literal, like rapid response. People are like, oh, I need a response rapidly from ICE about my case. So they call us. So a lot of times we get the calls just the regular office hours.
Yeah.
Although I will say immigration enforcement is like most likely to happen before office hours.
Gotcha.
So there's a few different purposes of the line. The most important purpose is for folks that are actually detained or who have a family member that is detained. In that case, we'll ask a few verifying questions because we can only serve folks that live or work or study in San Francisco, unfortunately. But if they are detained, from a different place, we can refer them to that county. Then the dispatcher actually conducts an intake with the caller directly and gets all the details. While that's happening, they've already activated the attorney. And then sort of the ideal situation is that we get the call soon enough that the person's still detained in San Francisco and we can send an attorney right there immediately. Yeah. Or alternatively, if a raid is in the process of happening, the attorney could get dispatched directly to the raid. But typically the call doesn't happen till afterwards.
Now, let me ask you a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
The attorney who's dispatched, if they were to arrive in the midst of the detention, what can they actually do? What does that look like?
So there's a few things that happen when the raid actually happens. We also do dispatch legal observers who aren't attorneys to sort of make sure immigration enforcement officers know the community's watching, essentially. Also, it can be really beneficial to their case later. If ICE does break a certain rule or a certain law, it can really help down the line. ICE officers, just like any type of law enforcement officers, will coerce folks into giving consent for them to search their home or coerce them into signing something that they don't need to sign legally. So that would be the type of thing that the attorney could help with. But honestly, the most important thing is just making sure that the attorney can give some information back and forth with the client, knows where they're getting taken, and can just sort of coordinate it. I think unless it was right at the very beginning, a lot of times it's best for the attorney just to go to Sansum, which is the ICE office in San Francisco, and try and just get there right away, and they can start filling out the paperwork.
Gotcha.
And it's really important because San Francisco doesn't have an ICE detention facility. So they try to move folks as soon as possible to the nearest ICE detention facility, which is in Bakersfield. Whoa. So they move folks by the end of the day. So it's really time is of the essence. The difference between that first day and even just a few days later is massive, especially now when they're doing a lot of expedited removals. Mm-hmm. So some folks are getting put on planes by the end of the day.
Wow. Right. Yeah. Could you say a little bit more about what you've seen in the past few months?
Yeah, definitely. I think we got almost as many calls in January as we did in the entire fiscal year of last year.
Okay.
So we're talking around 1,100 calls.
Wow.
But mostly they were trying to verify rumors. Right. Unfortunately, I don't think I can say with confidence that we get every single detention, but around this year, I think we've seen around maybe 7 or 8 detentions so far in San Francisco. Every single one of them except for 2 or 3 was actually at their check-in with ICE. It's a difficult situation because you can't tell folks to not go into these check-ins, because if you don't attend, then you get a deportation order automatically. And most of the times that folks go into their check-in with ICE, nothing happens, but they don't get detained. But that is a tactic that we're seeing. Folks are getting their check-in moved up, and then people are getting detained there. There was a couple of detentions like at people's houses. There was one day when we saw a small group of about just 6 officers driving around the city trying to do enforcement. But similar to what has been happening in Chicago, folks know they don't need to open their door. And so they called the hotline. We were able to actually give the folks a consultation with a lawyer and said, hey, we think they might come back. And so we were able to get those folks legal help. And
wow,
I think it's really powerful to think that stuff does work.
Paloma, you mentioned that as you started speaking with the hotline back in 2017 and 2018, one of the big things that struck you was the climate of fear. I'm curious as well, how is what Finn is describing now similar to what you heard working with the hotline back then, and what feels different as well?
2 things.
Sure.
People who are affected, so folks who are undocumented or live in mixed status families, I think similarly today and back in 2016 are absolutely, I think, self-policing themselves, meaning they are reacting to rumors, right? Not going to certain neighborhoods, maybe not taking their kids to school, maybe not showing up to that job. And that has repercussions on everyone. And you see it in the film where there's a parent asking whether they should take their kids to school that day in the Mission because there's been rumors of raids. I think this time around, the marked difference is that it seems as if this administration and their directive to enforcement is real. They're actually following through. Folks can't imagine, I think, if they're not undocumented, what it's like to deal with an enforcement agency who routinely skirts right at the edge of legality in order to carry out enforcement, meaning they will not identify themselves. They'll present a piece of paper that they say is a warrant that is not a warrant. They'll say they have to enter the premises of a business or a home, present themselves as if they have some sort of jurisdiction when they don't. And people want to believe in authority, and they want to believe that there are rules. And because of the way immigration enforcement works, and because we have demonized folks who don't have green cards or aren't citizens as folks who are not worthy of some sort of protection, then they sort of just operate with impunity.
Finn, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned perhaps it doesn't feel like San Francisco is the epicenter of the administration's gaze right now, but there is increasing tension to basically put pressure on the city in every way possible. Could you talk a little bit about what you've seen here in the Bay Area?
I mean, I think the reason why sanctuary cities are under attack is because it works, right? Like most folks like around the country who get passed over to immigration enforcement are getting passed over by the police. So if you are in a sanctuary city, it makes a huge difference to how ICE has to operate. They have to operate basically on their own. They can't work with the city for anything. They can't work for local police departments. They can't get any city records. They can't really make a plan with other types of law enforcement in the area. They just have to be essentially these like rogue agents operating.
And I think just something to your point about sanctuary cities, and I think what I wanted to capture in the film too, that if you're undocumented and you are the victim of a violent crime, and you think that by calling the police, you are putting yourself under threat of deportation or separation from your family, you won't call the police or you won't cooperate with police. That puts us all in danger. And that's, I think, to Finn's point, that sanctuary cities work. It's important for us to understand that they don't just work for folks who are undocumented, who are, again, the backbone of this economy, but they work for everyone. People don't see it if you're documented and you don't think about these quote unquote issues at all. So, yeah, that's really important. I feel like in this time.
Paloma, and if you have anything you wanted to add to that, but I've also got another question for you.
Sure. I mean, this gets to like a bigger point about the existential pain, I think, that's been increasing in our country for the last 20 years or so. And this distrust across geographies, the distrust of authority and systems, and also the othering between communities takes a big toll on everyone's psyche. It's something that you can't really see, but I think we all feel it. And the propaganda that's come with this amped up enforcement, I truly believe is tearing at the fabric of our lives. Like, I sound very dramatic, but I truly do. That was a little bit of what I was trying to portray in the film. And it's crazy to me that that remains really relevant. I kind of wish it wasn't.
Yeah. And that was my next question exactly, which is when I came across your film, it was almost hard to believe that it wasn't made last week. I mean, so many of the voices you captured resonate with this conversation, resonate with what I've been seeing happening today, these past few months. I'd like to ask you a bit of a speculative question, but I am curious, if you were to make another film today, what, if anything, would you want it to capture?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is something I think about all the time. And the continuation of this film would be something that places in context the economic exploitation of migrant communities. So you are criminalized, and yet you are also exploited by capital, right? So I'll give you the example of the predatory lending industry in the US that targets undocumented migrants who they actually do have some money. They're willing to buy property. They don't have access to loans at good rates. So there is a predatory lending industry that targets these communities. And better still, if this is someone who could potentially get deported or have to leave the country in an emergency, whatever property they buy gets sucked back into the system, into these predatory lending practices. So that's one example. I think there is so much to be said about how the powers that be want to use migrants for political rhetoric to win elections, but those same people will also economically exploit that same migrant population.
I guess my last question, or maybe my second to last question, is just what would you say is the most important thing for people to know right now? People who fear deportation, concerned allies, citizens. What do you think is kind of the crucial information to know right now?
In San Francisco, I mean, I think that it's most important for folks to have the hotline. So is it okay if I say the hotline number?
By all means.
It's 415-200-1548. So 415-200-1548. In a bigger sense, you know, it's important to remember, like, we do have the resources that we have, and we do have the gains we have because of organizing, because of people coming together. I think it's a different political moment than it was in 2016 when there was a lot of, like, big visible things happening. You know, this is the second go around. You know, folks aren't maybe surprised anymore, even if they're upset. And so a lot of folks are just digging their heels in it and doing the work. There's a lot of work going on in the community. There's a lot of really great organizing happening, especially from young people. I was just at a conference on Saturday where someone was mentioning that in the school district, like, high school students are walking out all over the country. A lot of people are getting connected to different types of resources. A lot of people are putting a lot of pressure on local politicians to defend sanctuary. I think especially there's a big need, and a lot of people, I guess, approach me about, like, you know, that idea of, like, allyship and getting involved. And I think that folks should feel comfortable getting involved in the whatever capacity makes sense and not falling into these pitfalls, right? Like, they want us to believe that we should fear our neighbors. They want us to believe that we're alone as Americans, right? And it's just simply not the case.
I guess something I like to keep into perspective It makes me feel a little better, but also not at the same time. That I think this current moment we're living in is also just echoing American history, right? There have been waves of migration since the formation of this country, waves of migration from Eastern Europe, the Irish, the Italians, the Chinese, and every single wave of migration came with blowback and propaganda to rile people up, to divide people, to stir up political movements for the gains of the powers that be, right? This is no different. It just happens to be folks from Central America, the Muslim population, and others who are targeted. I think if there's any silver lining from how brazen immigration enforcement is being right now, is that if they keep doing things like detaining green card holders, right, and other folks like Mahmoud Khalil, I think there has to be some international blowback, and also some blowback from people who think they don't care about this issue at all. If they're going to keep using ICE as this like shadow police force to target people that they don't like, in a way, it just sort of lays bare their intentions. And I do see people being angry about people overstepping.
Yeah.
And can I just say, like, the most memorable part of making enforcement hours was hearing all of the threats that the folks who volunteer on the hotline and the folks like Finn who work the hotline, hearing just like the constant barrage of horrible vitriol and hate and racism that was being spewed at them was just bone chilling.
Yeah.
All this rhetoric, all these structures, it's not by accident, just like you were mentioning, right? A lot of people make a lot of money off of these systems. It's really useful way to divide folks. And also, when you categorize people differently and have certain people have different protections than other folks, that's a really dangerous thing, right? And you kind of see them widening that category for folks that don't have the same rights as other folks. And I think it's just as simple as that.
Ultimately, people are really angry at something and they know something is deeply wrong in their lives. And I think that has much bigger implications to systems that aren't working for everyone. But instead of getting to the heart of the issue, they have to be given an enemy. And unfortunately, one of those enemies is undocumented people in America.
That's our show. Thank you so much for listening to episode 1 of Radio Pacific on KALW. We'll be back the first Tuesday of each month with a different topic in California news. There are a whole lot of people who made this possible. Scoring and sound design by Kirk Pearson and Dogbotic Studios. Editing by Ben Trefny. Thank you again to our guests, Kevin R. Johnson, Paloma Martinez, and Finn Palamaro. Seriously, go watch Enforcement Hours and keep an eye out for the next Paloma Martinez film. Special thanks to Lucien Mendel, Nish Harjani, Rob Byers, Gabby Burbay, Steffi Puerto, and of course, Lucy Bennett, for their feedback and support on early versions of this episode. Once again, I'm Eli Cohen. This is Radio Pacific. See you in June. Next time on Radio Pacific.
Reported brush fire, 67's Mulholland Cross a stunt.
January 7th is a day that changed Los Angeles forever. But as the city rebuilds,
All units responding to the brush fire in 67 is now the Zelda incident.
experts are facing an entirely new question.
Reported brush fire, 151 is now the Henry incident. This is now the King incident. This is now the Eaton incident.
Can firefighting in California as we know it still work?
Air to ground, County, V9 direct, 0136.02.